Within the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks of every semester, of every school year, our rector, the head of the seminary, would gather all of the students and the faculty up in the not a conference room, in our I just drew a blank on it, but the area we would always have meetings and have our discussions. And he'd pull us in and call it Father Dennis's Little Talk About the Stove. All of us that had been there for years knew this talk verbatim. We could give it to everyone. But all the new people were like, well, what's this talk going to be? What do you mean he's a little talk about the stove? What stove? And what the talk consisted of was all of the absolutely do-nots in the seminary. The different things that we might have thought were acceptable, but would get us kicked out if we weren't paying attention to those things. The don't touch the stove, it's hot talk. And it was true. All these things came about. Don't cause any massive scandal. Don't bring, number one, don't have a girlfriend. And if you do, definitely don't bring her on campus. There's all these different things that would come up. But some of it seemed a little more severe and a little more strict than I thought would be necessary. For instance, technically, according to the rules, if someone, because all internet activity is monitored on campus, if someone was caught going to a site they should not have gone to, they are on grounds for being removed from seminary. And I sat there, I'm like, well, that's kind of strict. I mean, it makes sense, but at the same time, that's kind of strict. And that's what we're hearing today in the gospel. This is Jesus's little talk about the stove. When he goes there and he says, not only these big sins that you all know, yes, killing someone's wrong and is really, really bad. Yes, committing adultery is a very bad thing to do. Bearing false witness is a really bad thing. In fact, these are all of the 10 commandments. You got the 5th, you've got the 6th, you've got the 7th commandment named. No, it is 8. It is 8. That was right. I used to have them memorized. Not for school, for my mother. But it's true. These 10 commandments are serious things you shouldn't break. But we all kind of know that. So Jesus takes them a step further. He talks about anger against your brother is committing murder in your heart. Having lustful thoughts about another is committing adultery in your heart. Simply swearing by something and not making it something upholding and holy, and swearing in general is a sin in the heart. And the reason it's important is Jesus is shifting the focus off of the law, off of the letter of the law. If you think about it, how often have we been given rules throughout our life? And one of the questions we ask is, how close can I get without crossing over? How close can I get to doing that thing without actually breaking the law or without actually doing something wrong? And then eventually, if we walk that path, we do step over every now and then. Already at that point, we've messed up. We shouldn't have ever thought about that to begin with. Because if we're starting saying, how close can I get? We no longer really are caring about why that law is in place. As I said in the seminary, it seems like it's a little strict when the priest did that, when the rector did that. And so I raised my hand and I asked, well, what happens if someone's struggling with those things? And they're doing their best to do better. He said, now there's a difference. If you are struggling with something, that means you're fighting against it. You're doing your best to do better. That's the grounds we can work on. We can help you do better. But for those that have zero care, that have no care at all, they're going to do whatever they want because they want to, and they're not struggling to do better, those are the people that fall in that category to get kicked out. Because If they're not willing to make themselves better, why would I ever put them in charge of God's people to try to make them better? Which then, if you look at Scripture, it makes sense. If we don't care in our heart about why the law's there, why those rules are there, and we're just following the rules because they're rules, we're missing the point. If we're doing it just because, then we're not really having the heart or the care in it. I love hearing in the sacrament of confession when someone comes up to me. They may have a long grocery list, and I might be in there for 15 minutes listening to the sins, but if they're struggling, some of my favorite confessions. Because they're working on being better. Their heart is trying to be better. They want to love more. Let's go back to that anger. Let's go back to that adultery that we talked about in the heart. If a person is angry at another because what they're doing is unjust, something that is wrong, blatantly and obviously wrong and evil, should we be upset? Should that upset us and anger us? Yes. But what do we do with that anger? Do we wield it as our weapon against the individual? Or do we say, God, this is unjust. How can I better the situation? How can I bring joy to others? How can I show your glory in this? You're no longer focusing on yourself and what you think is right, but you're giving it to God. If you see someone attractive and that what lust is it's centered on the self. I want this for my personal gain, for my pleasure. Versus you can see the same thing and say, God, what amazing beauty you've put into this world. Thank you for this grace you've given them. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to admire your creation. Where is the focus in the heart? If the focus is on the self, there's the sin. But if it truly is focused on the other, it reduces it a lot. Just the same way, if you have two cars speeding 30 over the speed limit, they get pulled over, they can have their license taken away for reckless endangerment. But if one person was going out for a joyride and having a great time, and the other person has someone dying in the backseat of their car and they're going to the hospital as fast as possible to try to save a life, which one is actually doing? Yes, they're both breaking the law. Yes, they're still both doing something that is technically wrong, but one, they have no heart or knowledge or choice of saying, yes, I'm going to do something wrong for my own good. They truly are choosing something with the heart. Those we can work with. In a week and a half, we hit Lent. In a week and a half, February, in 10 days from today, February 22nd is Ash Wednesday. Lent begins. And this Lent, I encourage you not to choose something big. Don't choose something drastic. Because those drastic things, when Lent's over, come back. When those things come back, what change did it really make in our life? What I'm going to encourage you to do is choose something small. Something you can do daily that will change your heart. For instance, if you're not waking up and making your bed and praying first thing in the morning, start doing that. And then when Lent's over, you don't go back to what you were, you continue, because it's a change of heart. If you're trying to vary up your eating habits because it's become a problem, Lent's a great opportunity to try something like that, to be better and be healthier. But when Lent's over, you don't change that. Lent isn't a time to say, okay, I'm going to be sad and depressed. It's the season of humility. That's why the color we wear is not purple, it's called violet. Yes, we'll still call it purple, but it's violet. And the reason it's violet, it has to do with the violet flower, which the violet flower's head hangs down in humility. Lent is a time for us to evaluate our lives and say, where can we be better? Where can we change our hearts? And pretty soon, when we end up hearing Jesus' little talk about the stove, it becomes common sense. Just as kids we are told, don't touch the stove, it's hot. As adults, we still know that. We don't have to have people tell us, don't touch the stove, it's hot. Still is going to be hot. But we also have learned, when the stove's off, it's not. Or by chance, you need to turn the stove on and add some water to get something that's stuck on the stove off and clean it. You start using that heat for something good. But you still never go and touch it. Never just put your hand on it because that'll burn. That's the purpose of Lent, to help us ingrain those teachings in our heart. That when we meet each other, when you see someone in Lenten time, you're not like, oh, that person's depressed and sad and sitting in sackcloth and ashes because they're depressed. It's Lent. But you can visually see the change in the person's heart. We become more joyous. If we can do that this Lent and change one small thing and change our hearts, our community will be very different and be much better come Easter. And then through us, God willing, the world will be much different and much better.